Hey, what's going on, you guys? Welcome to another episode. Today, I want to talk about my generation, which is the Millennials. Now, I want to preface this by saying that, I, the universe, the spirit world, um, everything that is life doesn't really recognize generations as being a real thing. It's mostly a made-up concept made by us humans, mostly taking place in the United States. Because let's face it, this really isn't much of a thing anywhere else in the world. Of course, it has. Of course, it has to be the United States. It kind of checks out, but but since we do recognize generations as being a real thing here, sorry, I can't really make this angle a whole lot better. I gotta get a new phone mount, but since we do recognize generations as being a real thing, I thought that I would take some time to talk a little bit about millennials specifically, because we are quite possibly the most, I don't want to say hated, but we're definitely the most scapegoated generation in recent history. And the reasons for that are still pretty unclear, although I think I can guess that it's because as millennials, we are the ones trying to bridge the gap between the old world and the new world, because we've had one foot in the old world, and now we have the other foot in the new world. And millennials, for those of you guys that aren't aware, are people that are born between 1981 to 1996, right? So, roughly people that are 30 to 45 years old. And I would even say that people that are born, people like me that are born between 1985 to 1992 are about as millennial as it gets. Those years definitely matter when it comes to millennials, but millennials as a whole are 30 to 45 years old. And what I've kind of noticed lately, as generations have become like kind of this new obsession that we have here in this country, we seem to have, especially with the access to social media and all these kinds of things, we seem to have this generational ego fetish where we're competing against older people, or younger people, and trying to lord it over them, how bad you had it, and my pain is worse than your pain. And at the end of the day, it really doesn't matter what year you were born, or how you grew up, or what technology you had growing up compared to older generations or younger generations. We're all human beings. We're all having to deal with uncomfortable emotions. We're all having to really, whether we like it or not, we really have to look at who we really are individually and bring that to the surface, right? It really doesn't matter. This really isn't an effort to generalize people based on generations. I'm just here to talk about my specific group of people within a certain age bracket specifically, because I remember when the hate for millennials was really bad, which was 10 years ago. I mean, it's still pretty bad today, but I would say like between 8 to 10 years ago was when people really like started treating millennials as second-class citizens, right? And I get that this isn't a new thing. Generations have been going through this. Older generations poo-pooing on the newer generations and calling them lazy and all this kind of stuff, entitled. But this one seems to be a little bit more personal, and it seems to be never-ending. Most of the generational hate for other generations were very short-lived. The hate for millennials hasn't been. It's been nonstop. Just nonstop disdain for 20 years, and I've kind of started to notice with older millennials is that they've been trying to distance themselves away from the millennial label, right? You'll often, if you go on social media, you'll often, they'll often call themselves Zennials, or they call themselves Gen X, right? Because they don't want to be blamed, right? They don't want to be associated with that label. And part of me kind of understands that, because they're probably trying to distance themselves away from the 30 or 31-year-old millennials, which I kind of understand, to be honest, because they're a lot closer to Gen Z. But I have noticed that a lot with older millennials is that they don't want anything to do with the millennial label, just because of how much scrutiny we've been under over the last 10 plus years. And I bring this up to say that, wherever you are in the millennial threshold, whether you're born in the early 80s, mid 90s, I want you to start taking some damn pride in being a millennial. Because if you're really getting this much hate and getting scapegoated this much, then it probably means that we're doing something right. It's kind of like, I mean, I don't really subscribe to Christianity anymore, but it's kind of like when Jesus starts talking in the New Testament about conforming to the pattern of the world, right? And how people are going to hate you because you refuse to conform to their old way of doing things, right? Like, life has to be all about, just working your ass off, taxes, and then you die, right? I mean, that's the old that's the old way of looking at the world, right? And I think that's why we get hated on the most, is because we're trying to move away from that, and we're the ones who actually want to who actually want to heal from trauma. We want to see, I mean, I know it probably seems like a cliche at this point, but we want to see the world get better. We don't want everything to stay the same. We want progression, right? If we ever are to have kids, right? We want a much better world for our kids than the world that we inherited, right? a world that's a lot less violent, a world that's a lot more unifying, a world that a world that is a lot more caring, a world where you could be much more free to be who you are and to live how to live how you want to live without all of these roadblocks in the way. And you know, I think that's a good thing. I would say that if you're a millennial from beginning to end, start being, you know, regardless of whether or not you think that generations are bullshit, which I kind of think they are, to be honest. I think that they're used mainly for marketing and, you know, just trying to attract people within a certain age group, right? Because it makes money, it brings in revenue, right? But regardless of whether you believe in that kind of stuff or not, I want you to start taking pride in your generation, right? And it doesn't matter, you know, you don't have to be a millennial. You know, you could be, you know, even if you're Gen Z, right? Or if you're somebody, or if you're in an older generation, start taking pride in who you are, and never mind all of the generalities and all the things that come with generation labeling and all that kind of stuff. I mean that's the one slippery slope that I see with like generation labels, is that it does generalize and people start to lose their own individuality, right? You know, I think we see it more now, where people are starting to identify themselves with their generation, and that's not what I'm here to do. Like, I'm not trying to get you to identify as, you know, I don't want you to start making t-shirts. I don't want you to start wearing hats, right? Just be proud of when you were born, where you came from, and just own it. If you're a millennial, just own it. And that's where I'm gonna and that's how I'm going to sign off today, is just own who you are. But anyway, guys, hope you enjoyed this video. Hope it brought value, and if it did, share it with your friends and your family. But like always, subscribe, share, do all the things. And until the next video, I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I will see you again in the next video.